Hey, welcome to Horror Ecos. Before we start, just a quick note. After the first few minutes, the rest of the video plays without breaks. So get comfortable and give it a try. I think you'll enjoy these stories. If you do, you can like and subscribe. Only if you really want to. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time it is for you? I read them every night. All right, let's begin tonight's story. Stories start now. The Ghost Who Saved My Marriage. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. Sure, I watched scary movies and laughed at the jump scares with my friends. But actual spirits walking among us? That seemed like something people made up to feel better about death, or to explain away strange coincidences. I was a practical person. I believed in what I could see and touch and prove. But that all changed 7 years ago when a man I never met in life saved my marriage from beyond the grave. His name was Frank, and he was my father-in-law. Well, he would have been if he had lived long enough for me to meet him. Frank died 3 years before I met Paul, his son. A sudden stroke took him in the middle of the night. He was only 58 years old. Paul was devastated. He told me once that losing his father felt like losing his compass. Frank had been his best friend, his mentor, the person he called when life got complicated. After Frank died, Paul felt lost for a very long time. When Paul and I met at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I saw someone who was kind and gentle, but carried a deep sadness in his eyes. We started talking, because we both reached for the last blueberry muffin at the same time. He smiled and told me to take it. I insisted he should have it. We ended up splitting it and talking for 3 hours straight. He told me about his father that very first day. He showed me pictures on his phone. Frank had the same warm smile as Paul, the same crinkles around his eyes when he laughed. We fell in love quickly. Within a year we were married in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Paul's mother cried the whole time. She told me later that she wished Frank could have been there to see his son so happy. I wished I could have met him too. From everything Paul told me, Frank sounded like an amazing man. He coached Little League baseball for 20 years. He never missed one of Paul's school events. He taught Paul how to fix cars, how to treat people with respect, how to be a good man. Paul kept a photo of his father on the nightstand. Sometimes I would catch him looking at it with such longing that it broke my heart. The first few years of our marriage were wonderful. We bought a small house with a backyard where we planned to raise children someday. Paul worked as an accountant for a mid-sized company downtown. I worked as a teacher at an elementary school. We had normal problems like everyone else. We argued about whose turn it was to do the dishes, or whether we could afford a vacation that year. But we always worked through things. We always found our way back to each other. But then something shifted. I am not exactly sure when it started. Maybe it was gradual, so slow that I did not notice until the damage was already deep. Paul started working longer hours. He seemed distant and distracted. When I asked him what was wrong, he would say nothing and change the subject. Our conversations became shorter and more superficial. We stopped laughing together. We stopped really seeing each other. The warmth between us grew cold. I tried everything I could think of to fix things. I suggested date nights and counseling and weekend getaways. Paul agreed half-heartedly, but nothing changed. He was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. I felt like I was living with a stranger. The loneliness was crushing. I would lie awake at night next to my husband and feel more alone than I ever had when I was actually single. At least back then I knew I was searching for someone. Now I had found someone and was losing him anyway. One evening in late October, everything came crashing down. The leaves outside were turning brilliant shades of orange and red. The air had that crisp quality that signals the arrival of autumn. I had made Paul's favorite dinner, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, just like his mother used to make. I set the table with candles. I wore the blue dress he always said he loved. I was trying so hard to reach him, to remind him of what we once had. He came home late, as usual. He barely looked at the dinner I had prepared. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his plate without touching his fork. I tried to make conversation, asking about his day, telling him about the funny thing one of my students had said. He gave one-word answers and did not ask me anything in return. The silence between us felt thick and suffocating. Finally, I could not take it anymore. My voice came out shaky when I spoke. I asked him what was happening to us. I asked him if he still loved me. I asked him if there was someone else. I asked him if he wanted to try to fix this or if he was done. Paul looked up at me then, and I will never forget the expression on his face. It was not anger or frustration. It was resignation. Defeat. He looked exhausted, like he had been carrying a weight for so long that he just could not hold it anymore. He put down his fork carefully, aligned it perfectly with the edge of his plate. Then he said the words that shattered my world. He wanted a divorce. Just like that. Simple and direct. No tears, no drama. He said he was not happy anymore. He said we had grown apart. He said maybe we had gotten married too quickly, before we really knew each other. He said he thought we would both be better off if we just ended things now before we wasted any more time. He said all of this in a flat, emotionless voice that scared me more than if he had been yelling. I sat there in shock. Part of me wanted to argue, to fight for our marriage, to tell him he was wrong and we could fix this. But another part of me, the tired part that had been trying so hard for so long, just felt relief. Maybe he was right. Maybe we were not meant to be together. Maybe it would be easier to just let go and move on. So instead of fighting, I heard myself say, okay. Okay. I agreed to a divorce. Just like that. 5 years of marriage ended over a pot roast dinner that neither of us ate. Paul seemed almost surprised that I agreed so easily. He nodded slowly and said we would figure out the details later. We could both stay in the house until we worked things out. We would try to be civil and mature about the whole thing. He got up from the table, left his dinner untouched, and went upstairs to the spare bedroom. That night we slept in separate rooms for the first time in our marriage. I lay in our bed, in what was now just my bed, and stared at the ceiling. I kept expecting to cry, but the tears would not come. I felt numb, empty, like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything that made me feel alive. I looked over at Frank's picture on the nightstand. Paul's father smiled back at me from that frozen moment in time. Forever 45 years old in that photograph. Forever healthy and strong. I wondered what he would think about his son giving up on his marriage. I wondered if he was somewhere out there, watching, disappointed. Eventually I fell into a restless sleep. And that is when Frank came to me for the first time. I was dreaming, or at least I thought I was dreaming. I found myself standing in a kitchen I did not recognize. It looked like a kitchen from the 1980s, with yellow wallpaper and avocado green appliances. A man was standing by the sink. He turned around and I recognized him immediately from all the photos I had seen. It was Frank. He looked exactly like his pictures, but also different somehow. More real, more present. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. His hair was graying at the temples. He had Paul's eyes, or rather Paul had his eyes. Kind and warm and full of concern. He walked toward me and spoke my name. His voice was gentle but urgent. He told me not to leave his son. He said Paul needed me. He said I needed Paul. He said we were going through a rough patch, but it would get better if I just held on. He begged me to reconsider. He said Paul was lost right now, but he would find his way back if I gave him the chance. He said our love was real and worth fighting for. He spoke with such intensity, such conviction, that I felt tears running down my face even in the dream. I wanted to ask him so many questions. How was he here? Why was he here? Was this real, or just my subconscious trying to process everything? But before I could say anything, the dream faded and I woke up. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I was sweating even though the room was cool. The dream had felt so vivid, so real. I could still hear Frank's voice in my head, still see the concern in his eyes. But it was just a dream. Of course it was just a dream. My mind was playing tricks on me, conjuring up Paul's father to tell me what some part of me wanted to hear. I lay back down and tried to go back to sleep. I told myself to ignore it. It was just stress and sadness manifesting in my dreams. It did not mean anything. Paul wanted a divorce, and I had agreed. That was reality. A dream about a man I never met was not going to change anything. I needed to accept what was happening and move forward with my life. The next morning was awkward. Paul and I moved around each other like strangers sharing space in a hotel. We did not talk about the divorce or the dream or anything of substance. He left early for work. I got ready and headed to the school where I taught. I tried to focus on my students, on their bright faces and endless energy, but my mind kept wandering. I kept thinking about Paul saying he wanted a divorce. I kept thinking about that dream. I kept seeing Frank's face, hearing his voice begging me not to leave his son. By lunchtime, I had pushed it all to the back of my mind. I was sitting in the teacher's lounge eating a sandwich and grading papers when my cell phone rang. I did not recognize the number, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end identified himself as Marcus, Paul's boss. My stomach immediately dropped. Why would Paul's boss be calling me? Marcus's voice was tense and scared. He told me there had been an emergency. Paul had collapsed at work. They thought it was a heart attack. The ambulance had just taken him to St. Mary's Hospital. I needed to get there right away. Then he hung up. I do not remember much about the next few minutes. I know I must have told my principal I had to leave. I know I must have grabbed my purse and my keys. I know I must have walked to my car in the parking lot. But all of it happened in a blur of panic and terror. Paul had a heart attack. My husband, who was only 33 years old, had a heart attack. It did not seem possible. He was young and healthy. He went to the gym. He ate reasonably well. This could not be happening. I got in my car and started the engine with shaking hands. I pulled out of the parking lot too fast, tires squealing. My mind was racing. What if he died? What if the last real conversation we had was about getting a divorce? What if I never got to tell him I loved him one more time? I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The other cars on the road seemed to be moving in slow motion. I needed to get to the hospital. I needed to see Paul. I needed him to be okay. That is when Frank appeared. I was stopped at a red light, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white, when I felt someone in the passenger seat next to me. I turned my head, and there he was. Frank, sitting in my car, looking at me with those same concerned eyes from my dream. But I was not dreaming now. I was wide awake, and there was a ghost sitting in my passenger seat. I should have screamed. I should have been terrified. But somehow I was not. Maybe I was too scared about Paul to be scared of anything else. Maybe some part of me had been expecting this after the dream. Maybe I was in shock and nothing seemed real anymore anyway. Whatever the reason, I just stared at him and he stared back at me. He spoke. His voice was clear and real, not echoey or strange like ghosts in movies. He said I needed to tell Paul I loved him. He said I needed to say it out loud. Right now. In this moment. He said if I did that, Paul would live. If I did not, he would die. He looked at me with such urgency, such desperate hope, that I almost did it. The words were right there on the tip of my tongue. But then my practical mind kicked in. This was not real. This could not be real. I was having some kind of breakdown brought on by stress and fear. I was hallucinating. People did not just appear and disappear in cars. Ghosts were not real, and even if they were, they could not save people's lives just because someone said they loved them. That was not how the world worked. That was not how medicine worked. This was my mind trying to cope with an impossible situation by creating an impossible solution. So I ignored him. I looked away from Frank and focused on the road. The light turned green and I drove forward. When I glanced back at the passenger seat, he was gone. But I could still feel where he had been. The air felt different somehow. Heavier. Charged with something I could not name. I pushed it out of my mind. I had to focus on getting to the hospital. I had to be there for Paul. Whatever was happening with my mental state, whatever hallucinations I was having, I could deal with later. Right now my husband needed me. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital felt like it took hours even though it was only about 15 minutes. I parked badly, taking up 2 spaces, and ran toward the emergency room entrance. The automatic doors seemed to move too slowly. Everything seemed to be happening underwater. I rushed to the front desk and gave them Paul's name. The nurse made a phone call and then told me someone would come get me. I had to wait. I paced back and forth in the waiting area. Other people sat in chairs, looking worried or bored or sick. A television in the corner played some daytime talk show with the volume too loud. The smell of antiseptic and fear filled my nostrils. I kept checking my phone even though no one was going to call. I kept looking at the doors, hoping someone would come tell me something. Anything about Paul's condition. Finally, a different nurse appeared and called my name. She led me through a maze of hallways. We passed rooms with open doors where I could see people in hospital beds hooked up to machines. We passed doctors and nurses moving quickly with purpose. Everything was too bright and too loud and too real. The nurse stopped at a set of double doors and used her badge to open them. The sign above said Cardiac Care Unit. Just as we were about to go through, I saw Frank again. He was standing off to the side in the hallway. This time he did not try to talk to me. He just looked at me with the saddest expression I had ever seen. His eyes were filled with disappointment and grief. He did not say anything, but I knew what he was thinking. I had not listened to him. I had not said the words. And now it might be too late. The nurse led me to a room where they had taken Paul. There were doctors and nurses everywhere. Machines beeping. People calling out numbers and medical terms I did not understand. I could see Paul on a gurney in the center of all the chaos. His shirt had been cut open. Electrode pads covered his chest. An oxygen mask covered his face. His skin looked gray and waxy. His eyes were closed. Then I watched my husband die. The monitor that had been beeping steadily suddenly made a long, continuous tone. The line on the screen went flat. Someone yelled that he was in VFib. A doctor grabbed paddles and yelled clear. They shocked him. Paul's body jerked on the table. The line stayed flat. They shocked him again. This time the line jumped back into a rhythm. The beeping resumed. Paul was alive again, but only for a moment. Before I could even process what had just happened, the long tone came back. He had died again. They shocked him again. His body convulsed. The rhythm came back. He was alive. Then he died again. They shocked him again. Alive. Dead. Alive. Dead. I stood there frozen watching this horrible cycle. not sure if I was going to vomit or faint or both. One of the doctors finally noticed me standing there. He said something to a nurse, and she quickly ushered me out of the room. She told me they were doing everything they could. She told me Paul was critical, but they were working on him. She told me I should wait in a private family room while they stabilized him and took him to the cath lab. She led me to a small room with comfortable chairs and a box of tissues and closed the door behind her. I sat down and immediately stood back up. I could not sit still. I paced the small room. I looked at the motivational posters on the walls with their meaningless phrases about hope and courage. I picked up a magazine and put it back down without looking at it. I checked my phone. I sent a quick text to Paul's mother telling her what had happened and which hospital we were at. I did not know what else to do. That is when I realized the nurse had taken me to this particular room for a reason. This was not just any family waiting room. This was the room they put people in when they did not expect the patient to make it. This was the room where they delivered bad news. The comfortable chairs were here so people would have somewhere to collapse when they got the worst news of their lives. The tissues were here for the inevitable tears. They had put me here because they thought Paul was going to die. I sank into one of those comfortable chairs. The gravity of the situation finally hit me all at once. Paul might die today. My husband might die, and the last meaningful conversation we had was about getting divorced. He would die thinking I did not love him anymore. He would die thinking our marriage was a mistake. He would die without knowing that I still loved him desperately, that I always had, that I never stopped even when things got hard. And that is when I saw Frank again. He was standing in the corner of the room watching me. This time his expression was different. He still looked sad, but there was something else there too. Compassion, maybe. Understanding. He did not say anything. He just stood there looking at me with those kind eyes that were so much like his son's eyes. I stared back at him, and this time I did not try to convince myself he was not real. He was real enough. Real in whatever way mattered. I broke down. All the tears I had not cried the night before came flooding out now. I sobbed so hard I could barely breathe. I cried for Paul fighting for his life down the hall. I cried for our broken marriage. I cried for all the things I should have said and did not say. I cried for Frank standing there watching his son suffer and being powerless to help. I cried until I had no tears left. And then, in that moment of complete desperation and grief, I knew what I had to do. It did not matter if it was real or not. It did not matter if Frank was actually there, or if I was hallucinating, or if this was all some elaborate stress-induced delusion. None of that mattered. What mattered was that my husband was dying, and I needed him to know that I loved him. So I said it out loud. I said, "Please live, my darling husband. I need you. I love you." I said it to the empty room, or to Frank, or to the universe, or to God, or to whatever force might be listening. I said it with my whole heart. I said it and meant every single word. I needed Paul. I loved Paul. I did not want a divorce. I wanted my husband. I wanted our life together. I wanted another chance to make things right. As soon as the words left my mouth, something shifted. I cannot explain it properly. The air in the room felt different. Lighter somehow. Like a weight had been lifted. And Frank, who had been looking at me so sadly, smiled. It was a small smile, just a slight curve of his lips, but it was filled with relief and hope. Then he faded away. Not dramatically like in a movie. He just sort of became less solid, less present, until he was not there anymore. I sat in that room for what felt like forever. I had no sense of time passing. I just sat there numb and exhausted and terrified. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Paul collapsing at work, the drive to the hospital, watching him die and come back and die again. Frank appearing to me 3 different times. The words I had finally spoken out loud. Eventually the door opened and a doctor came in. He looked tired and his scrubs had blood on them. I stood up on shaky legs, preparing myself for the worst. But the doctor's face was neutral, professional. He introduced himself as Dr. Martinez, the interventional cardiologist who had been working on Paul. He told me to sit down. I sat. Dr. Martinez explained that Paul had suffered a massive heart attack. One of his main coronary arteries had been almost completely blocked. They had managed to stabilize him enough to get him to the cath lab where they could insert stents to open the blockage. But it had been touch and go. Paul had actually died once more while they were working on him. His heart had stopped and they had to shock him back. 3 times total he had died. 3 times they had brought him back. They had successfully placed several stents. The artery was now open, and blood was flowing to his heart again. But the next 24 to 48 hours would be critical. Paul's heart had been deprived of oxygen for a significant amount of time. There might be permanent damage. There might be complications. His condition was, as the doctor delicately put it, iffy. They were moving him to the cardiac ECU where he would be monitored closely. I could see him once they got him settled. I thanked Dr. Martinez. I do not know what else I said. I was still processing everything he had told me. Paul was alive. That was the important thing. He was alive. He had died 3 times, but they brought him back 3 times, and now he was alive. The words I had spoken had not been too late, after all. Or maybe they had nothing to do with it. Maybe the doctors and their skill and their machines were what saved him. Maybe Frank had nothing to do with anything. I did not know, and in that moment, I did not care. Paul was alive. They let me see him about an hour later. A nurse led me to the cardiac ICU. Another maze of rooms and equipment and beeping machines. Paul's room was small and crowded with medical equipment. He was lying in the bed looking small and fragile and very pale. Tubes and wires connected him to various machines. A breathing tube had been removed, but he still had an oxygen cannula in his nose. His eyes were closed. He looked like he was sleeping except for all the machines and monitors proving otherwise. I sat in the chair next to his bed. I was afraid to touch him at first. Afraid I might hurt him or dislodge something important. But then I carefully took his hand in mine. His skin was cool, and his hand was limp. But I could feel his pulse. Faint, but steady. He was alive. I leaned close to him and whispered, "I love you." I do not know if he heard me. He did not respond. But I said it anyway. I said it again and again. I told him I was sorry for agreeing to the divorce. I told him I wanted to fight for our marriage. I told him I needed him to live. I told him to come back to me. I told him everything I should have said before this happened. The nurses came in regularly to check on him. They adjusted machines and made notes on charts and spoke in low professional voices. They told me I should go home and get some rest. I refused. I was not leaving Paul. They said I could stay, but I should try to sleep a little. They brought me a blanket and dimmed the lights. I pulled the chair closer to Paul's bed, held his hand, and kept watch. That first night was the longest night of my life. I did not sleep. I could not. I just sat there watching the monitors, watching the lines go up and down, watching the numbers change. Every time a different alarm went off, my heart would stop. Every time a nurse came rushing in, I thought this was it. He was dying again. But the night passed slowly, and Paul kept breathing. By morning, he still had not woken up. The doctors said this was normal. His body had been through massive trauma. and needed time to heal. They were keeping him sedated to let his heart rest. I should be patient. I should stay positive. I should talk to him. Because sometimes patients could hear things even when they were unconscious. So I talked. I told him about my day at school yesterday before everything happened. I told him about the funny thing one of my students had said. I told him about the weather outside. I told him random memories from our relationship. I reminded him of our first date, splitting that blueberry muffin and talking for hours. I reminded him of our wedding day, how his mother had cried, and how we had danced to our song under the string lights in his mother's backyard. I reminded him of the day we bought our house, how excited we were, how we had christened every room. I talked until my voice was hoarse. The second night was just like the first. I sat by his bed. I held his hand. I watched the monitors. I dozed off occasionally in the chair but jerked awake at every sound. The nurses kept encouraging me to go home, but I refused. I had made a promise. I had said I loved him and I needed him. I was not leaving him now. On the morning of the third day, Paul opened his eyes. It was just for a moment at first. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Then they closed again. But it was enough to make my heart soar. I called for the nurse. She came in and checked his vitals and said this was a good sign. He was starting to come out of it. I should keep talking to him. Throughout that day, Paul woke up more and more frequently. Each time he stayed awake a little longer. The first few times he did not seem to recognize where he was or what had happened. He looked scared and disoriented. I squeezed his hand and told him he was okay. He was in the hospital. He had been sick, but he was going to be okay. I kept my voice calm and soothing even though inside I was screaming with relief and joy. By evening of the third day, Paul was truly awake. The doctors had removed most of the tubes. He could talk, though his voice was weak and raspy. The first thing he said to me was my name. Just my name. But the way he said it, with such love and relief, made me start crying all over again. I told him everything that had happened. I told him about the heart attack and the ambulance and the hospital and the stents. I told him he had died 3 times and come back 3 times. I told him how scared I had been. I told him how I had stayed by his side for 3 days. And then I told him the most important thing. I told him I loved him. I told him I did not want a divorce. I told him I wanted to fix our marriage. I told him whatever problems we had, we could work through them together. I told him life was too short and too precious to give up on the people we love. I told him I needed him and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him if he would still have me. Paul started crying. Tears rolled down his pale cheeks. He squeezed my hand as hard as he could in his weakened state. He said he loved me too. He said he had been scared and lost and taking it out on me instead of talking to me about what he was feeling. He said he did not really want a divorce. He said he had just felt so overwhelmed and alone and did not know how to fix things, so he thought ending it would be easier. He said he was sorry. He said he wanted to try again. He said almost dying had given him clarity about what really mattered in life. We both cried. We held hands and cried and said I love you over and over like we were making up for all the times we should have said it but did not. A nurse came in to check on us and saw us crying and asked if everything was okay. We both started laughing through our tears. Yes, everything was okay. Everything was going to be okay. I did not tell Paul about Frank right away. I was not sure how to explain it. I was not even sure if I believed it myself. Maybe it had all been stress and fear and my imagination running wild. Maybe the dreams and the visions were just my subconscious trying to process everything. Maybe there was a perfectly logical explanation for all of it. But then again, maybe there was not. Maybe some things could not be explained logically. Maybe Frank really had been watching over his son. Maybe he really had appeared to me 3 times. Maybe the words I spoke really had saved Paul's life. I did not know. And maybe I did not need to know. Paul recovered slowly but steadily. He stayed in the hospital for a week total. Then he came home and started cardiac rehabilitation. He had to change his diet and his lifestyle. He had to take a bunch of medications every day. He had to go to regular checkups with his cardiologist. He had to take things slow and not overdo it. It was a long recovery, but he got stronger every day. Our marriage got stronger every day too. We started really talking to each other again. Not just about surface things, but about real things. Paul opened up about the stress he had been under at work, and how he had felt like he was failing at everything. He talked about missing his father, and not knowing how to deal with that grief. He talked about feeling like he was drowning, and not wanting to burden me with his problems, so he just shut down instead. We cried together. We held each other. We promised to never let things get that bad again. We promised to always communicate, always be honest, always fight for each other. We also started going to couples counseling. A therapist helped us work through our issues and taught us better ways to handle conflict and stress. It was hard sometimes. We had to face difficult truths about ourselves and our relationship. But we did the work. We were both committed to making our marriage strong and healthy. About 6 months after the heart attack, I finally told Paul about Frank. We were sitting on our back porch on a warm summer evening. Paul was doing much better by then. He was back at work and feeling almost like his old self. We were holding hands and watching the sunset and just enjoying being together. It felt like the right time. I told him about the dream the night after he asked for the divorce. I told him about seeing Frank in the car on the way to the hospital. I told him about Frank appearing in the waiting room, and then finally in the hospital hallway. I told him about the words Frank told me to say and how I finally said them. I told him all of it, even though I was afraid Paul would think I was crazy. Paul listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he squeezed my hand and smiled. He said he believed me. He said he had felt his father's presence around him sometimes, especially during difficult moments. He said maybe Frank really had been watching over us. Maybe death was not the end. Maybe love was strong enough to cross the boundary between worlds. Maybe his father had saved our marriage and his life. Paul said he liked to think that was true. That night, Paul took his father's photo off the nightstand where it had been for years. He said he did not need it there anymore. He said he knew his father was with him in a different way now. We put the photo in the living room instead, on a shelf with other family pictures. Frank smiling out at us, forever young, forever present in our lives. And Frank has kept his promise in a way. Every now and then I catch a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye. A figure in the hallway that vanishes when I turn my head. A presence in an empty room. Sometimes I hear a sound like someone clearing their throat when Paul and I start to argue. It is like Frank is still watching over us, still protecting his son, still making sure we keep our promises to each other. Paul says I am imagining it. He says it with a smile though, like he kind of hopes I am right. Maybe I am imagining it. Or maybe Frank really does check in on us from time to time. Maybe he is satisfied with how things turned out. Maybe he knows that his son is happy and loved, and that his marriage is strong. Maybe that gives him peace. Either way, I am grateful. I am grateful that Paul survived. I am grateful that we got a second chance. I am grateful that we learned to truly appreciate each other before it was too late. I am grateful for every single day we have together. And I am grateful to Frank, whether he was real or imagined, whether he actually saved Paul's life, or whether he was just a manifestation of my desperate hope in my darkest moment. Either way, He gave me the push I needed to say the words that needed to be said. These past 7 years have been the best years of our marriage. We went through hell and came out stronger on the other side. We know what it feels like to almost lose each other, and that knowledge makes us cherish what we have even more. We do not take each other for granted. We do not let problems fester. We talk about things. We work through things. We love each other fiercely and deliberately every single day. We have built a beautiful life together. We have 2 children now, a boy and a girl. Paul coaches their little league teams just like his father coached his. He is an amazing dad, patient and kind, and always present. When our son was born, we named him Frank. When we brought baby Frank home from the hospital, I swear I felt a warm presence in the room with us. Paul felt it too. We looked at each other and smiled. Sometimes late at night when everyone else is asleep, I sit by the window and think about everything that happened 7 years ago. I think about how close I came to losing Paul. I think about how close we came to giving up on each other. I think about the series of coincidences or miracles or whatever they were that brought us back together. I think about Frank and his 3 appearances and the words he told me to say, and how I almost did not say them. And I wonder what would have happened if I had not said those words. Would Paul have died? Or would the doctors have saved him anyway, and Frank had nothing to do with it? I will never know for sure. But in my heart, I believe Frank saved us. I believe he loved his son so much that death itself could not stop him from protecting Paul when he needed it most. I believe some bonds are too strong to be broken by something as simple as dying. I never met my father-in-law in life, but in a way, he is one of the most important people in my world. He gave me back my husband. He saved our marriage. He taught me that love is stronger than fear, stronger than pride, stronger than death itself. Every day I try to honor the gift he gave us by loving Paul with everything I have. Every day I try to be worthy of the second chance we were given. Frank still peeks in from time to time. I see him in quiet moments. I feel him in the warmth of the sun on my face or in the gentle breeze on a summer evening. Sometimes when Paul is playing with our kids in the backyard, and I see that pure joy on his face, I swear I can see Frank standing at the edge of the yard watching them. That same smile on his face. That same love in his eyes. He does not talk to me anymore. He does not need to. His message has been delivered and received. His son is loved and happy and alive. His grandchildren carry his name and his spirit forward. His presence is woven into the fabric of our family. That is enough. That is everything. People ask me sometimes if I believe in ghosts. I used to say no without hesitation. Now I pause and think about Frank. I think about the impossible things I witnessed 7 years ago. I think about the thin line between life and death and how sometimes, if we are very lucky, love can cross that line and pull us back from the edge. And I say yes. I believe in ghosts. Or at least I believe in one ghost. The ghost who saved my marriage. The ghost who saved my life. The ghost I never met but who I will be grateful to for the rest of my days. Frank, wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for loving your son so much that death could not stop you from protecting him. Thank you for begging me not to give up when I wanted to walk away. Thank you for giving me the words I needed to say. Thank you for the life we have now. Thank you for everything. We will take care of Paul for you. We will make sure he knows how much he is loved. We will make sure your grandchildren know about their grandfather who loved them before they were even born. We will honor your memory every single day by choosing love over fear, hope over despair, togetherness over loneliness. You can rest now. Your son is okay. We are all okay. And whenever you want to peek in on us, we will be here, living the beautiful life you helped save, grateful beyond words for the gift you gave us, the gift of each other, the gift of second chances, the gift of love that never dies. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for everything. Your son loves you. Your grandchildren will know you, and I will forever be grateful to the father-in-law I never met in life, but who changed my life forever from beyond the grave. You saved us. You saved me. And I will never ever forget that. Next one story start now. The night I met my friend's dead grandmother. I never believed in ghosts, not even a little bit. When I was growing up, my friends would tell scary stories at sleepovers about spirits and haunted houses and things that go bump in the night. They would get all worked up and scared, jumping at every little sound. But not me. I would just roll my eyes and laugh. Ghosts were not real. They were just stories people made up to scare each other. Dead people stay dead. They did not come back to wander around looking through drawers in the middle of the night. That was just silly superstition and overactive imaginations. At least that is what I thought, until the night I stayed over at my friend Sarah's house when I was 18 years old. Sarah and I had been friends since we were about 15. We met in high school and clicked right away. She was funny and smart and easy to talk to. We were not best friends exactly, but we were close. The kind of friends who would hang out after school sometimes or text each other about random stuff. She was a few years older than me, already 20 when this happened, and she seemed very mature and worldly to me at the time. She had her own car and her own money from working at a shop in town. She seemed so much more grown up than I felt. Sarah lived with her parents in an old terraced house on the edge of town. The house had been in her family for generations. Her grandparents had lived there, and before that her great-grandparents. It was one of those narrow, tall houses that are all connected in a row, built sometime in the late 1800s probably. The kind of house with creaky floorboards and thin walls, and a steep, narrow staircase. Everything about it felt old. Not in a bad way necessarily, just old. Like the house held a lot of history in its walls, a lot of memories, a lot of life that had been lived there over more than a century. I had been to Sarah's house plenty of times before. I knew her parents a little bit. They were nice people, friendly but kind of quiet. Her mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Her dad did something with computers that I never really understood. They seemed like a normal family living in a normal old house. Nothing spooky or weird about them at all. Sarah had told me that her grandmother had lived with them until a few years ago when she passed away. But we never really talked about it much. It was just a fact about her family history, nothing more. The night everything happened was in early October. I remember because the weather was just starting to turn cold. The leaves were changing colors and falling off the trees. Halloween decorations were starting to appear in shop windows and on people's front porches. There was that feeling in the air that autumn had truly arrived. Sarah had called me a few days earlier and asked if I wanted to stay over on Saturday night. Her parents were going away on holiday for a week, leaving Saturday morning, and she did not want to be alone in the house on the first night. She made it sound casual, like no big deal, but I could tell she was actually a bit nervous about being by herself. Of course I said yes. A sleepover at Sarah's house sounded fun. We could stay up late watching movies and eating junk food without any parents around to tell us to go to bed. We could talk about whatever we wanted without worrying about being overheard. It would be like being adults, having the whole house to ourselves. I was excited about it all week. Saturday arrived and I packed a small bag with my pajamas and toothbrush and a change of clothes for Sunday. My mom drove me over to Sarah's house around 6 in the evening. Sarah's parents were just finishing loading up their car for their trip. They were driving to the coast to stay at a bed and breakfast for the week. A little vacation to celebrate their anniversary. Sarah's mom gave me a hug and told me to help Sarah look after the house while they were gone. She reminded Sarah about locking all the doors at night and gave her a whole list of instructions about the heating and taking the bins out and watering the plants. Sarah nodded along like she was listening, but I could tell she was only half paying attention. Her dad gave her some cash for food and told her to call if there was any emergency. Then they got in their car and drove off, waving at us through the window. Sarah and I went inside the house. It felt strange being there without her parents. Bigger somehow, emptier. The house had always felt cozy and lived in when her whole family was there. But now with just the two of us, it felt different. The silence was more noticeable. Our voices seemed to echo slightly. Every little sound seemed louder. The house settling, the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking in the hallway. I shook off the weird feeling and followed Sarah into the kitchen. We made ourselves some dinner. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and crisps and some fruit. We sat at the kitchen table eating and chatting about normal stuff. School drama, boys we liked, plans for the future. Sarah had just started a new job at a clothing store in town and was telling me about her annoying manager, who was always criticizing the way she folded shirts. I told her about the fight my parents had been having about whether to get a new car or fix the old one. Normal teenage conversation. Normal Saturday night with a friend. After we cleaned up from dinner, we went into the living room to watch television. Sarah scrolled through the channels trying to find something good to watch. We settled on some romantic comedy neither of us had seen before. It was okay, but not great. We were both on our phones half the time, only sort of paying attention to the movie. Just a normal, boring evening of the kind that teenagers have all the time. Nothing special. Nothing memorable. Or so I thought. Around 9 o'clock there was a knock on the front door. Sarah got up to answer it, and I heard her talking to someone. A male voice. I could not hear what they were saying, but Sarah sounded happy and a bit giggly. She came back into the living room, followed by a guy I vaguely recognized. His name was Tom or Tim or something like that. He was a bit older, maybe 22 or 23. I had met him once before at some party. He knew Sarah from her work, or from some friend group they shared. I could not remember exactly. Tom came in and sat down in the armchair. Sarah sat back down on the couch, but she was sitting differently now. More alert. More aware of how she looked. She kept tucking her hair behind her ear and laughing at everything Tom said, even when it was not that funny. I realized pretty quickly that Sarah fancied this guy. And from the way he was looking at her and smiling, I was pretty sure he fancied her too. They had that energy between them. That electricity that happens when two people are attracted to each other but have not done anything about it yet. That nervous, excited energy. I suddenly felt like a third wheel. Like I was intruding on something private, even though technically I had been there first. Sarah and Tom were doing that thing where they were talking to each other but also sort of performing for each other. Laughing too loud. Making lots of eye contact. Finding excuses to touch each other's arm or shoulder. They were not ignoring me exactly, but I definitely was not the focus of their attention anymore. I was just kind of there in the background. We all sat there watching the rest of the movie together, but I was not really watching anymore. I was just thinking about how I was clearly in the way. Sarah and Tom probably wanted some time alone together. I did not want to be that annoying friend who did not know when to leave. But I also could not actually leave because I was sleeping over. I was stuck there. I tried to figure out what to do. Should I just sit there and pretend I did not notice what was happening? Should I say something? Should I just go upstairs and give them some space? The movie ended around 10:30. Tom showed no signs of leaving. He and Sarah were sitting next to each other on the couch now, close enough that their legs were almost touching. They were talking about some band they both liked, and some concert they wanted to go to. I sat there feeling increasingly awkward and invisible. Finally, I decided to just remove myself from the situation. I faked a big yawn and stretched my arms over my head. "I am actually pretty tired," I said, even though I was not tired at all. "I think I am going to head up to bed if that is okay." Sarah looked over at me like she had almost forgotten I was there. "Oh yeah, of course," she said. "You know where my room is. There are extra blankets in the cupboard if you get cold." "Thanks," I said. I stood up and said goodnight to both of them. Tom smiled and waved. Sarah told me she would be up later. I could tell she was grateful I was giving them some privacy. I was happy to do it. I just hoped they would not be too loud or weird while I was trying to sleep upstairs. I climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. Sarah's house had 3 bedrooms upstairs and a small bathroom. Her parents' room was at the front of the house. Sarah's room was at the back. The 3rd bedroom, the smallest one, had been her grandmother's room when she was alive. Now it was just used for storage and guests. Sarah had told me I would be sleeping in her room. She had a double bed, so there was plenty of space for both of us. Or at least there would have been if Sarah actually came to bed. But I had a feeling she might not make it upstairs at all that night. I went into Sarah's bedroom and closed the door behind me. The room was exactly how I remembered it from previous visits. Pretty normal for a 20-year-old girl. A double bed with a purple comforter. A dresser against one wall with a mirror above it. A small desk in the corner covered in makeup and hair products. Posters on the walls of bands and actors. Clothes draped over the chair. The comfortable mess of someone who actually lived in the space and did not worry too much about keeping it perfectly tidy. I changed into my pajamas and washed my face in the bathroom down the hall. When I came back to Sarah's room, I could hear the murmur of voices from downstairs. Sarah and Tom talking and laughing. I smiled to myself. Good for her. I hope things worked out between them. I turned off the overhead light and turned on the small lamp on the bedside table. The warm, dim light made the room feel cozy and safe. I climbed into Sarah's bed and pulled the covers up. The bed was comfortable and smelled like the lavender laundry detergent Sarah's mom always used. I closed my eyes. I actually fell asleep pretty quickly. I was more tired than I had realized. The week had been long and stressful with exams at school and drama with my own family. Being in a comfortable bed in a quiet house was exactly what I needed. I drifted off within minutes of lying down. I slept deeply and dreamlessly for what felt like a long time. I do not know exactly what time it was when I woke up. The room was dark except for a thin line of streetlight coming through the gap in the curtains. The house was quiet. No more voices from downstairs. Either Tom had left or he and Sarah had gone quiet. I lay there in that fuzzy state between sleep and waking, not really alert but not fully asleep either. That is when I heard it. The sound of a drawer opening, the gentle squeak of wood sliding against wood. Then the soft rustling sound of hands moving through fabric. Someone was going through the dresser drawers. My first thought was that Sarah had come upstairs and was looking for something. Maybe she was trying to find something to wear. Or maybe she was looking for something specific and trying not to wake me. That made sense. I smiled to myself in the dark. Then I remembered my earlier thought about why she might be looking through drawers. Maybe she was looking for condoms. Maybe things had progressed with Tom and she needed to find protection. The thought made me want to laugh out loud, but I held it in. I did not want to embarrass her by letting her know I was awake. The rummaging continued. Drawer after drawer being opened and quietly searched through. Whoever it was being fairly quiet about it, but not totally silent. I could hear every movement clearly in the quiet room. The sound of someone carefully but urgently looking for something. I lay there with my eyes closed, trying not to move, trying not to give away that I was awake. Let Sarah find whatever she needed, and leave. Then I could go back to sleep. But the searching went on for longer than seemed normal. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. How long does it take to find a box of condoms? They had to be in one of the drawers. Unless Sarah did not actually have any. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe she was desperately searching through every drawer, hoping to find some but coming up empty. Part of me wanted to open my eyes and offer to help look. But another part of me felt like that would be way too awkward and embarrassing for everyone involved. Better to just pretend to be asleep and let her figure it out on her own. The sound continued, more drawers opening, more rustling and searching. I started to feel less amused and more confused. This was taking way too long. What could Sarah possibly be looking for that required searching through every single drawer in the room? And why was she being so persistent about it? If she could not find what she needed, why did she not just give up and go back downstairs? My curiosity finally got the better of me. I decided to just open my eyes and see what was going on. Maybe Sarah needed help finding something. Maybe I could actually be useful instead of just lying there, pretending to be asleep. I took a breath and opened my eyes. The bedside lamp was off. I must have turned it off before falling asleep, or maybe it had turned itself off on a timer. The room was dim and shadowy. It took my eyes a moment to adjust to the darkness. I could see the shape of the dresser against the wall, and I could see someone standing there. Someone going through the top drawer. Someone in a dressing gown and slippers. But it was not Sarah. The person standing at the dresser was much older, much shorter. The figure was hunched over slightly, bent with age. She wore an old-fashioned dressing gown, the kind that buttons all the way up the front and goes down to the ankles, the kind that old ladies wear. Her hair was gray and thin, pulled back from her face. She wore soft slippers on her feet that made almost no sound on the wooden floor. Her hands moved through the drawer with a kind of frantic urgency, pushing things aside, searching for something specific. My brain struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. This was not Sarah. This was an old woman. I did not know any old women who would be in Sarah's house. The only elderly person I knew associated with this house was Sarah's grandmother. But her grandmother was dead. She had died years ago. So who was this? The only logical explanation was that it must be some other relative. Maybe Sarah's nan from her dad's side, who I had never met. Maybe she had a key to the house and had let herself in. Maybe she lived nearby and was checking on the house while Sarah's parents were away. Maybe she did not know Sarah had a friend staying over. That made sense. That was the only thing that made sense. This must be Sarah's other grandmother, or maybe a great aunt, or some elderly relative I did not know about. I sat up in bed. The movement made the mattress squeak slightly. The old woman at the dresser heard the sound and stopped what she was doing. She turned her head slowly to look at me. Our eyes met in the dim light. Her face was deeply lined with age. Her eyes were pale, maybe blue or gray, but they looked confused and unfocused, like she was not fully aware of where she was or what she was doing. She stared at me for a long moment, seeming to realize that she had woken me up. I stared back at her, still half asleep, still confused about what was happening. Then, without saying a word, the old woman closed the drawer. She turned away from the dresser. She shuffled slowly toward the bedroom door in her soft slippers. She moved carefully, like someone who was unsteady on their feet, like someone who was very old and fragile and did not want to fall. She reached the door and opened it quietly. Then she shuffled out into the hallway. I heard her slow footsteps moving away, heading toward the front of the house. Then silence. I sat there in bed feeling completely confused and disoriented. What had just happened? Who was that old woman? Why was she going through Sarah's dresser in the middle of the night? Where had she gone? Should I go after her and ask if she was okay? Should I wake Sarah and tell her there was someone in the house? I rubbed my eyes and looked at the clock on the bedside table. It was just after 2 in the morning. I had been asleep for maybe 3 hours. The house was completely quiet now. No sounds from downstairs. No sounds from the hallway. Just silence. I lay back down and pulled the covers up. I felt unsettled and confused, but also very tired. My brain felt foggy and slow. I could not quite process what had just happened. Maybe I had been dreaming. Maybe the whole thing was just a weird, vivid dream brought on by sleeping in an unfamiliar bed in an old house. That made more sense than an elderly stranger wandering around the house in the middle of the night. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. It took a while. I kept thinking about the old woman in the dressing gown. The way she had looked at me with those confused, unfocused eyes. The way she had shuffled out of the room so quietly. It felt real. It felt like something that had actually happened, not like a dream. But it had to have been a dream. There was no other explanation that made sense. Eventually exhaustion won and I drifted back off to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the curtains. I could hear birds singing outside. The house had that Sunday morning feeling. Quiet and peaceful and lazy. I stretched and sat up in bed. Sarah was not in the room. I checked my phone. It was almost 10 o'clock. I had slept much later than I usually did. I got out of bed and got dressed. I went downstairs to find Sarah. She was in the kitchen making breakfast. Well, making toast anyway. The kettle was boiling for tea. She looked tired but happy. Her hair was messy and she was still in her pajamas. She smiled when she saw me. "Morning," she said. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah, pretty good," I said. I sat down at the kitchen table. "What about you? Did you stay up late?" Sarah blushed slightly. "Tom left around midnight. We just talked mostly. He is really nice." "That is great," I said. I was genuinely happy for her. "So, are you going to see him again?" "Maybe. I hope so. He said he would text me." Sarah put 2 slices of toast on a plate and brought it over to the table with butter and jam. She went back to make tea. "Want some?" "Yes, please," I said. I buttered my toast and took a bite. We sat there in comfortable silence for a moment. Then I remembered something. The old woman from last night. I had almost forgotten about it. It seemed like a dream in the bright light of morning. But now that I was thinking about it again, I wanted to ask Sarah about it. Just to confirm that it had been a dream and not something that actually happened. I decided to approach it casually, like it was funny and not weird. "Hey, so I had this really strange dream last night," I said. "Oh yeah?" Sarah looked up from her tea. "Yeah. I thought I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was someone in your room, going through your dresser drawers." I laughed. At first I thought it was you looking for something. I actually thought maybe you were looking for condoms or something, because Tom was here. Sarah laughed too. "What? No. We were not doing that. We were just talking. I know. But in my half-asleep brain, that is what I thought. But then I properly opened my eyes and it was not you at all. It was an old lady in a dressing gown and slippers." Sarah's smile faded slightly. She was staring at me with a strange expression. "An old lady?" "Yeah. I assumed it must be your nan or some relative I did not know about." But then I realized that did not make sense, because why would she be in the house in the middle of the night? So it must have been a dream. But it felt so real. I took another bite of toast. It was weird. She was really going through your drawers like she was looking for something. Then when she noticed I was awake, she just shuffled out of the room. Sarah had gone very pale. She was gripping her mug of tea so hard her knuckles were white. She was staring at me with wide eyes. "What did she look like?" she asked quietly. I shrugged. "I do not know. Just an old lady. Gray hair. Dressing gown. Slippers." "Why? Do you know who I am talking about?" Sarah set her mug down on the table carefully. Her hand was shaking slightly. "That was not a dream," she said. "What do you mean?" "You saw my Nan, my actual Nan. She lived here until she died 4 years ago." I laughed nervously. "What? No. That does not make sense. Your Nan is dead. I must have dreamed it." "You saw a ghost," Sarah said. She was not laughing. She looked deadly serious. "And scared. You saw my Nan's ghost." My stomach dropped. A cold feeling washed over me. "That is not possible," I said. But even as I said it, I knew Sarah was telling the truth. The old woman had been too detailed, too real to be just a dream. I had seen her clearly. I had seen the dressing gown, the slippers, the thin gray hair, the confused expression on her lined face. I had seen all of it. And it had not felt like a dream. It had felt like reality. Sarah got up from the table and went into the living room. I followed her. She pulled an old photo album off the bookshelf and opened it. She flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. Then she turned the album around to show me. There was a photo of an elderly woman. She was smiling at the camera. She wore a cardigan and had thin gray hair pulled back from her face. And I recognized her immediately. It was the woman from last night. The same face, the same hair, the same everything. "That is my Nan," Sarah said quietly. "My dad's mom. She lived with us for the last 8 years of her life. She died 4 years ago when I was 16. I stared at the photo. My hands had started trembling. "I saw her," I whispered. "I actually saw her. She was in your room last night." Sarah nodded slowly. She sat down on the couch. I sat down next to her. My mind was racing. I had seen a ghost. An actual real ghost. I had seen a dead person. This was not possible. This could not be real. But it was real. I knew it was real because Sarah was confirming it. Because the photo matched exactly what I had seen. Because the whole thing had felt too real and too detailed to be anything other than what it was. "Tell me everything you saw," Sarah said. So I did. I told her the whole thing. About hearing the drawers opening. About assuming it was Sarah. About sitting up and seeing the old woman in the dressing gown. About how she had been going through the dresser with that urgent searching quality. About how she had looked at me when she realized I was awake. About how she had shuffled out of the room without saying anything. I told her every detail I could remember. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. "That is exactly what she used to do," she said softly. "What do you mean?" "My Nan had dementia for the last few years of her life. It got really bad toward the end. She would wander around at night. She would get confused about where she was. She would go into the wrong rooms. She would go through cupboards and drawers looking for things." Sarah's eyes were wet. She wiped at them with the back of her hand. She used to do it all the time. She would come into my room in the middle of the night and wake me up because she was going through my dresser. Just like you described. Looking through every drawer like she was searching for something specific. What was she looking for? I asked. Sarah shook her head. We never knew. Whenever we asked her, she could not tell us. She would just say she was looking for something, but she did not know what. Or she would give some confused answer that did not make sense. The dementia made her so confused. She did not know what she was doing half the time. I felt tears prickling my own eyes. This was so sad, and so strange, and so utterly terrifying. Why is she still here? I asked. Why is she still wandering around at night looking through drawers? I do not know, Sarah said. She was crying now. I have seen her a few times since she died. Not often. Maybe 5 or 6 times total over the past 4 years. Always at night. Always wandering around the house like she used to when she was alive. Like she is still confused. Like she still does not know where she is, or what she is looking for. You never told me this, I said. I know. I do not tell people. They think I am crazy, or making it up. And I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe it was just my grief playing tricks on my mind. But you saw her too. You saw her, and you did not even know she existed. So it is real. She is real. She is still here. We sat there together on the couch, both of us crying a little bit, both of us trying to process what this meant. Sarah's grandmother was still in this house. 4 years after her death, she was still here, still wandering, still searching, still lost in the confusion that had plagued the end of her life. It was heartbreaking. It was terrifying. It was proof that death was not the end of everything. That consciousness persisted in some form. That people could get stuck somehow between life and death, trapped in the same patterns they had in life. Does anyone else know? I asked. Your parents? Have they seen her? Mom has seen her once. She does not like to talk about it. It upsets her too much. I do not think Dad has seen her, or if he has not said anything. My nan was his mom, so it would be really hard for him. Sarah wiped her eyes again. Mostly she just appears when I am here alone, like last night. Maybe she is more comfortable appearing when there are not too many people around. I do not know how any of this works. What do we do? I asked. Should we try to help her? Like get a priest or a medium or something? Sarah shook her head. I do not know. Part of me thinks we should. Part of me thinks we should just leave her alone. She is not hurting anyone. She is just confused and lost. Maybe she needs to be here. Maybe this is where she is supposed to be until she figures out whatever she needs to figure out. We talked about it for a long time. We went over every detail again and again. We looked at more photos of Sarah's grandmother. Sarah told me stories about her. About how kind she had been before the dementia. About how she used to bake cookies and read bedtime stories to Sarah when she was little. About how hard it had been to watch her decline. About how painful it had been when she finally died. And we talked about what it meant that I had seen her. That I, a person who did not believe in ghosts, who had never experienced anything supernatural, had seen clear and undeniable proof that consciousness persisted after death. That Sarah's grandmother was still here in some form, still present, still trapped in the confused patterns of her final years. It changed everything I thought I knew about the world, about life and death, about what came after, about the nature of consciousness and existence. I stayed at Sarah's house for a few more hours that Sunday, but the mood had changed completely. We were both subdued and thoughtful, processing what had happened. What it meant. When my mom came to pick me up in the afternoon, I hugged Sarah goodbye and told her to call me if she needed to talk. She nodded and said she would. On the drive home, my mom asked if I had fun. I said yes. She asked what we did. I said we watched movies and talked. I did not mention Tom. I did not mention the ghost. How could I? How could I explain to my mum that I had seen Sarah's dead grandmother wandering around in the middle of the night? She would think I was insane. She would think I had dreamed it, or imagined it, or made it up for attention. So I said nothing. I just stared out the window and thought about the old woman in the dressing gown. The ghost who was still looking for something. Still searching. Still lost. That was 15 years ago now. I am 33 years old. Sarah and I are still friends, though we do not see each other as often as we used to. She moved away a few years ago for work. Her parents sold the old terraced house about 5 years after that night. They bought a smaller place on the other side of town. Sarah told me that her grandmother stopped appearing in the house about a year before they sold it. She just stopped showing up. Maybe she finally found what she was looking for. Maybe she finally moved on to wherever spirits go when they are ready to let go. Or maybe she just decided to stop manifesting in visible form. Sarah does not know. Neither do I. But I think about that night all the time. The night I saw a ghost. The night I saw clear and undeniable proof that death is not the end. That consciousness persists. That the people we love continue in some form. I think about that confused old woman going through drawers looking for something she could not name. I think about how sad it was that she was trapped in that confusion even after death. I think about what it means for all of us. If Sarah's grandmother could get stuck like that, could we all get stuck? Could we all end up trapped in the patterns and confusions of our final days or years? It scared me for a long time. I had nightmares about it. About dying and then being trapped as a ghost, confused and lost, wandering around looking for something I could not remember. But over time my fear has softened into something else. Not quite peace, but something like acceptance. Death is not the end. That much I know for certain. I have seen proof with my own eyes. And maybe that is comforting in a way. Maybe knowing that consciousness persists, even in a confused, diminished form, is better than thinking death is just total oblivion. At least there is something after. At least we continue in some way. I hope Sarah's grandmother found peace eventually. I hope she found whatever she was looking for. I hope she is no longer confused or lost. I hope she is somewhere better now. Somewhere she can remember who she was before the dementia. Somewhere she can be whole and healthy and at peace. I like to think that is possible. That ghosts are not necessarily stuck forever. That they can move on when they are ready. That they can heal and grow, and eventually let go of whatever is keeping them tethered to the physical world. I still do not talk about this experience very often. Most people would not believe me. They would think I dreamed it, or imagined it, or made it up. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. I saw Sarah's grandmother. I saw her as clearly as I see anything. She was real. She was there, and that changed everything for me. Changed how I think about life and death. Changed how I think about consciousness and existence. Changed how I think about what happens when we die. I do not think about it with fear anymore. I think about it with wonder, with curiosity, with a sense that the universe is stranger and more complex than we can possibly understand. That there are layers of reality we do not perceive most of the time. That the dead are not necessarily gone. They might still be here, just in a form we cannot normally see or touch or interact with. Wandering through the houses they loved. Going through drawers looking for something they have forgotten. Still confused. Still searching. Still holding on. And maybe, if we are very lucky or very unlucky depending on how you look at it, we might catch a glimpse of them. We might see them for just a moment. An old woman in a dressing gown in the middle of the night. A ghost who refuses to leave. A spirit who is still looking for something, still wandering, still here, still trapped between one world and the next, still searching for whatever it is she lost, still hoping to find it, still unable to let go and move on. That was the night I met my friend's dead grandmother. The night I stopped being so certain about what is real and what is not. The night I learned that death is not an ending but a transition. The night everything changed. And I will never forget it as long as I live. And maybe, when I die, if I get stuck like Sarah's grandmother did, I will wander around going through drawers, looking for something I cannot name. Looking for whatever it is that will set me free. Looking for peace. Looking for an ending. Looking for whatever comes next. Next one story start now. The ghost dog that brought her puppies home. I have always been the kind of person who needs proof before I believe in anything. Show me the facts. Show me the evidence. Show me something I can touch and measure and verify. That is just how my brain works. I never believed in ghosts or spirits or anything supernatural. Those things were for movies and campfire stories, not for real life. Real life was concrete and logical and followed the laws of physics. At least that is what I thought until the day I walked into my friend's house and met a dog that should not have existed. My friend's name is Marcus. We met in college and became close friends pretty quickly. We both loved basketball and video games, and had the same weird sense of humor that nobody else seemed to appreciate. After college, Marcus got a job in the same city where I lived, so we stayed in touch. We would hang out at least once or twice a week, either at my place or his. We were the kind of friends who did not need to make elaborate plans. We would just text each other and say, hey, want to come over and watch the game? Or want to grab some food, or want to just hang out and do nothing. That easy, comfortable friendship that feels more like family than anything else. Marcus had moved into a new house about 6 months before this story happened. It was a small 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with a fenced backyard. He was really excited about having his own space after years of living in apartments. He talked about maybe getting a dog eventually since he finally had a yard. He had grown up with dogs and missed having one around. But he traveled for work sometimes and was not sure if it was fair to get a dog when he might have to leave it alone for days at a time. So he kept putting off the decision. The day everything happened was a normal Tuesday in late September. The weather was starting to turn cool after a hot summer. The leaves were just beginning to change colors. I had finished work early and texted Marcus to see if he wanted to hang out. He said, sure, come on over. He had just picked up some new game he wanted to try, and we could order pizza. Sounded perfect to me. I drove over to his house, which was only about 15 minutes from where I lived. I pulled up in front of his house around 5:30 in the evening. The sun was still up, but starting to get lower in the sky. That golden late afternoon light that makes everything look warm and peaceful. Marcus's car was in the driveway. I parked on the street and walked up the path to his front door. I could hear him inside, his footsteps coming toward the door. I heard the lock click, and then the door swung open. Marcus was wearing jeans and an old college sweatshirt. He had his backpack slung over one shoulder, the one he used to carry his laptop and work stuff. He smiled when he saw me and stepped aside to let me in. But then he stopped right there in the doorway and pulled his backpack off his shoulder. He started digging around inside it like he was looking for something. His keys maybe, or his phone. I stood there on the doorstep waiting for him to finish whatever he was doing. While I waited, I glanced past Marcus into his house. I had been there plenty of times before, so I knew the layout. The front door opened directly into the living room. There was a couch against one wall facing a television. A coffee table in front of the couch. Some bookshelves. Pretty standard bachelor pad setup. Nothing fancy but comfortable. Beyond the living room, I could see into the kitchen and the hallway that led to the bedrooms and bathroom. Everything looked normal and familiar. Except for the dog. There was a dog standing in the middle of Marcus's living room, looking at us. At least I thought it was a dog. It had the basic shape and size of a medium-sized dog. Maybe something like a border collie or an Australian shepherd. But something about it was very wrong. Very off. I could not quite put my finger on what was weird about it. The dog was just standing there, not moving, looking in our direction. Staring at the door. Staring at Marcus. My brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Marcus must have gotten a dog. That was the logical explanation. He had talked about wanting one. Maybe he had finally decided to adopt one and had not told me yet. Maybe he wanted it to be a surprise. I looked at the dog again and frowned. Why did it look so strange? The lighting in the house must have been playing tricks on my eyes or something. I decided to just ask him directly. "Did you get a dog?" I said. Marcus looked up from his backpack. "No," he said. He said it casually, like it was a weird random question. Then he followed my gaze into his house. He looked into his living room to see what I was staring at. And his face completely dropped. All the color drained out of Marcus's face. His eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. He looked like he had just seen something impossible and terrifying. Which I guess he had. He stood there frozen for a second, just staring into his own living room with this expression of absolute shock and disbelief. His backpack slipped from his hands and hit the ground with a thud. "Do you see that?" he whispered. "The dog?" I said. "Yeah, I see it." We both took a couple careful steps inside the house. Neither of us took our eyes off the dog. As soon as we stepped through the doorway, the dog reacted. It started moving toward us. Fast. Really fast. It came sprinting across the living room straight at us like a dog does when its owner comes home after being gone all day. That excited, happy run with the tail wagging and the whole body wiggling with joy. And that is when I realized what was so wrong about this dog. It was not solid. It was not real. Or at least not real in the way living things are supposed to be real. The dog looked like somebody had drawn it with a pencil, and the drawing had somehow come to life, and was running around in three-dimensional space. I could see the lines and the shading, but there was no color and no solid form. It was like looking at a moving sketch, a moving pencil drawing running through the air. I could see through it a little bit. Not completely transparent, but not fully opaque either. And it was silent. No sound of paws hitting the floor. No panting or breathing. Just this silent pencil-drawn dog sprinting toward us. My brain completely short-circuited. This could not be happening. This violated every rule of reality that I understood. Dogs were solid. Living creatures were made of flesh and bone and blood. They were not made of pencil lines floating in the air. This was impossible. But it was happening right in front of me. I could see it clearly. There was nothing wrong with my eyes. I was not drunk or high. I was wide awake and completely sober, and this impossible thing was happening anyway. The ghost dog reached us and went absolutely crazy with excitement. It ran in circles around our legs. Or at least it looked like it was running through our legs. I could see the drawing pass through the space where my legs were, but I could not feel anything. No touch. No pressure. No sensation at all. The dog jumped up on Marcus like dogs do when they are excited. I saw the drawn form leap up and place its front paws against Marcus's chest. But Marcus did not stumble backward. He did not react physically at all. Because the dog was not actually touching him. It could not touch him. It was not solid enough to make contact. but we could both see it. Clear as day. This ghost dog was jumping and spinning and running around us in circles. Its mouth was open in what looked like a happy panting expression. Its tail was wagging frantically. It was doing everything an excited dog would do when greeting its human. Except there was no sound and no physical contact. Just the visual of this pencil-drawn dog going completely wild with joy. Marcus and I looked at each other with identical expressions of shock and confusion and terror. We both needed confirmation that the other person was seeing this too. Because if only one of us was seeing it, then that person was having a psychotic break or a hallucination or something. But if we were both seeing it, then it was real. Or at least real enough that we both perceived it the same way. "You see it?" Marcus said. His voice was shaking. Yeah, it's right there," I said, pointing at the dog. "You see it?" "I see it," Marcus said. He sounded like he could barely believe his own words. "It's a dog," I said stupidly. Like that needed to be clarified. "It's not solid," Marcus said. "I know. What is it? Is it a ghost?" "I don't know. I don't know what it is. You see it though, right? Please tell me you see it." "I see it. It's right there." We kept going back and forth like this, asking each other over and over if we were seeing the same thing, confirming and reconfirming that we were both witnessing this impossible event. The ghost dog kept running circles around us and jumping up on us the whole time. It seemed completely oblivious to our panic and confusion. It was just happy, pure uncomplicated joy at seeing Marcus come home. I looked around for some kind of explanation. Maybe there were mirrors set up in a weird way that was creating an optical illusion. Maybe there was a projector somewhere casting an image of a dog. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate prank Marcus had set up. But I could not see any equipment. No mirrors, no projectors, no cameras. Just us and this impossible ghost dog in an otherwise completely normal living room. I checked my other senses to see if anything else was strange. The temperature felt normal. Not cold like ghost stories always say ghosts make things cold. The air smelled normal, like Marcus's house always smelled. A little bit of cologne and laundry detergent and just that general lived-in smell. Nothing weird or supernatural. No mysterious fog or strange sounds. Just the visual of this ghost dog, and nothing else out of the ordinary. The ghost dog kept this up for what felt like forever, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it turned away from us. It trotted across the living room toward the back of the house. Marcus had a sliding glass door that led from his kitchen to his backyard. The door was closed. I watched as the ghost dog walked right through the closed glass door and disappeared outside. Not opened the door. Not used a doggy door. Just walked through the solid glass like it was not even there and vanished into the backyard. Marcus and I stood there in his living room in complete silence. We were both breathing hard like we had just run a marathon. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were shaking. Marcus looked pale and sick. He walked over to his couch and sat down heavily. He put his head in his hands. "What was that?" I finally managed to say. Marcus did not answer right away. He just sat there with his head in his hands, taking deep breaths. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet. He looked like he was about to cry. "That was my dog," he said quietly. "You said you did not have a dog," I said. "I don't. Not anymore. She died." My stomach dropped. When did she die? 8 months ago. Before I moved into this house. She never even lived here. I sat down on the couch next to Marcus. My legs felt weak and I did not trust them to hold me up anymore. "Tell me what happened," I said. Marcus took a shaky breath and started talking. He told me that about a year ago, back when he was still living in his old apartment, he had adopted a dog from a rescue shelter. Her name was Luna. She was a border collie mix about 3 years old. The sweetest dog he had ever met. Smart and loyal and affectionate. Marcus absolutely adored her. She went everywhere with him. He had been so happy to finally have a dog after wanting one for so long. A few months after adopting Luna, Marcus noticed she was gaining weight. He thought maybe he was feeding her too much, or not exercising her enough. He took her to the vet to get her checked out. That is when they discovered Luna was pregnant. She must have gotten pregnant right before Marcus adopted her, or maybe just after. The shelter had not known. It happened sometimes with rescue dogs. Marcus was shocked but also kind of excited. Puppies. He had never dealt with puppies before, but he did a bunch of research and prepared as best he could. He set up a comfortable space for Luna. He bought supplies. He read articles and watched videos about what to expect during dog labor and delivery. He was nervous but ready. But things went wrong. Marcus's voice broke when he told me this part. Luna went into labor on a Saturday morning. At first everything seemed okay. She delivered one puppy successfully. A healthy little pup. Marcus was relieved and amazed. But then Luna started having complications. She was struggling. Something was very wrong. Marcus rushed her to the emergency vet clinic. They tried everything they could, but they could not save her. Luna died during the delivery. The puppies died too. All of them. None of them made it. The vet said sometimes these things just happen with pregnancies. Complications that nobody could predict or prevent. It was not Marcus's fault. There was nothing he could have done differently. But that did not make it hurt any less. Marcus was devastated. He had only had Luna for a few months, but he had loved her completely. And to lose her that way, so suddenly and traumatically, was horrible. He blamed himself even though logically he knew it was not his fault. He should have noticed something was wrong sooner. He should have taken her to the vet earlier in the pregnancy. He should have done something different. The guilt ate at him. He had Luna cremated. He kept her ashes in a small wooden box. For weeks after her death, he kept thinking he saw her out of the corner of his eye. He would hear phantom sounds like her collar jingling or her nails clicking on the floor. He would wake up in the middle of the night convinced she was in the room with him. He knew it was just his grief playing tricks on his mind. His brain was so used to her being there that it kept expecting to see her and hear her even though she was gone. Eventually the phantom sensations faded. Marcus forced himself to move on with his life. He threw himself into his work. He spent more time with friends. He started looking for a new place to live because his old apartment had too many memories of Luna. That was when he found this house and moved in about 6 months ago. He had not gotten another dog. He was not ready. Maybe he would never be ready. The pain of losing Luna was still too fresh. And now Luna had just appeared in his living room. 8 months after her death. In a house she had never lived in. In a form that was impossible and should not exist. A ghost. An actual ghost. I did not know what to say. What do you say to something like that? I sat there next to Marcus trying to process everything he had just told me and everything I had just witnessed. I had seen a ghost. An actual real ghost. Or at least something I had no other word for. A dog that was dead but somehow still present, still aware, still happy to see Marcus come home. It was impossible, but it had happened. We had both seen it. I had not imagined it. I had not hallucinated it. It was real. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Marcus wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I stared at the sliding glass door where the ghost dog had disappeared. I kept expecting it to come back through the door at any moment. Part of me wanted to see it again. Part of me was terrified at the thought. My entire understanding of reality had just been shattered, and I did not know how to put the pieces back together. "I'm sorry," Marcus finally said. "I know this is insane. I don't know what to say. I don't know what's happening." "It's okay," I said. Though nothing about this was okay. We both saw it. It was real. We're not crazy. But how is it possible? Ghosts aren't real. They can't be real. "I don't know, man. But we just saw one." "What do I do?" Marcus looked at me helplessly. "Do I call someone? Who do you even call for something like this? Ghost hunters? A priest? Animal control?" I almost laughed at that last one. The image of calling animal control to report a ghost dog was absurd enough to break through the tension a little bit. "I don't think there's a protocol for this," I said. Marcus nodded. He looked exhausted, like someone had pulled the plug on all his energy and he was running on empty. "Maybe she won't come back," he said quietly. "Maybe that was a one-time thing. Some kind of weird glitch in reality or something." I was about to agree with him when I saw movement outside. Through the sliding glass door. Something was coming across the backyard toward the house. The ghost dog, Luna. She was trotting back toward the door. Coming back inside. My heart rate spiked again. "Marcus," I said. I pointed at the door. Marcus looked where I was pointing and froze. We both watched as Luna walked through the closed glass door again. She came into the kitchen and then into the living room where we were sitting. She walked with that happy casual dog gait. Tail wagging gently. Looking around like she was checking out her home. But she was not alone this time. Following behind Luna were 5 small balls of light. They floated through the air at about the height puppies would be if they were walking on the ground. Each ball of light was roughly the size of a softball. They glowed with a soft white light that was bright enough to see clearly but not harsh or blinding. They moved together in a loose group, following Luna, bobbing gently up and down as they floated along. It looked like they were walking even though they had no legs, like they were moving in sync with invisible puppy bodies. Luna walked over to where Marcus and I were sitting on the couch. The 5 balls of light followed her. They stayed close to her like puppies following their mother. Luna sat down in front of Marcus. The light balls arranged themselves around her. 2 on one side, 3 on the other. All of them glowing softly in the late afternoon light coming through the windows. Marcus made a sound I had never heard him make before. A choked sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Tears started streaming down his face. He was staring at the 5 balls of light with an expression of complete heartbreak and wonder. "The puppies," he whispered. "Those are her puppies." I looked at the 5 balls of light. The puppies that had died before they were even born. The puppies that never got to live or play or grow up. They were here now, with their mother, in whatever form ghosts took when they never got to have a physical body. Just pure light, pure energy, pure spirit. Luna looked up at Marcus. Even though her face was just a pencil drawing, I could see the expression there. The love, the contentment. She had brought her puppies to show him, to let him meet them, to let him know they were okay, they were together, they were at peace. Marcus slowly reached out his hand toward Luna. I knew he would not be able to touch her. She was not solid, but he reached out anyway. His hand passed right through her head as he tried to pet her. No sensation, no contact, just his hand moving through empty air, or air that looked like it contained a dog but did not. Marcus's face crumpled. He pulled his hand back and covered his face with both hands. His shoulders shook as he cried. I put my hand on his shoulder. I did not know what else to do. This was so far beyond anything I had ever experienced or imagined that I had no frame of reference for how to help. My friend was sitting next to me crying while his dead dog and her dead puppies manifested as ghosts in his living room. This was not something you could fix with a hug or some encouraging words. This was something profound and supernatural and overwhelming. The ghost dog and the glowing puppies stayed for maybe 5 more minutes. Luna sat there calmly while the puppies bobbed and floated around her. They all seemed peaceful, content, like they just wanted to be near Marcus for a little while, to let him know they existed somewhere, to bring him some kind of comfort or closure. Then, as gently as they had arrived, they faded away. Luna and the 5 balls of light gradually became less solid, less bright, less present. It was not dramatic. They did not vanish in a flash or disappear suddenly. They just slowly became fainter and fainter until they were gone. Until we were sitting in a normal living room, with normal late afternoon light and no impossible ghost dogs anywhere to be seen. Marcus and I sat there in stunned silence for a long time. Neither of us knew what to say. What words could possibly be adequate after something like that? I kept looking around the room, half expecting Luna to reappear. But she did not. The house felt empty now in a way it had not before. Like something precious had been present and was now gone. Did that really happen? Marcus finally said. His voice was hoarse from crying. Yeah, I said. That really happened. You saw it too. The puppies. The lights. I saw them. All 5 of them. I'm not crazy. You're not crazy. We both saw it. It was real. Marcus laughed. It was a shaky, broken laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. If I was just hallucinating, at least there would be a rational explanation. I know what you mean, I said. We sat there for a while longer, not saying much. What was there to say? We had just witnessed something that should not exist. Something that violated every scientific principle and logical assumption about how the world worked. Ghosts were real. Or at least one ghost was real. A sweet border collie mix named Luna, who loved her owner so much that death could not keep her away. Who came back with her babies to show him they were okay. To bring him peace. To give him closure. Eventually we ordered that pizza we had planned to order. We ate it mostly in silence. We tried to watch the game on television, but neither of us could focus. We kept looking around the room, waiting to see if Luna would come back. She did not, at least not that night. I went home around 10. I hugged Marcus before I left. He looked drained and emotionally exhausted, but also somehow lighter. Like a weight he had been carrying had been lifted. He said he would call me tomorrow. I drove home in a daze. I kept replaying everything I had seen over and over in my mind. The pencil-drawn dog. The balls of light. The impossible reality of it all. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Luna running toward us. I saw the puppies following her. I saw Marcus's face when he realized what he was seeing. I kept getting up and walking around my apartment, looking in corners, checking rooms. I was not sure what I was looking for. More ghosts? Proof that what I had seen was real? Confirmation that I was not losing my mind? The next morning I called Marcus. He said he had not slept much either. He said Luna had not appeared again. He did not know if she would come back or if that had been a one-time thing. He sounded calmer than he had the night before. More at peace. He said seeing her had hurt, but it had also healed something in him. He had never gotten to say goodbye. He had never gotten to see the puppies. And now he had. In a way. It was not enough, but it was something. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and I talked about what happened constantly. We went over every detail. We tried to make sense of it. We looked up information about ghosts and spirits and paranormal activity. We read stories from other people who claimed to have seen ghosts. Some of the stories seemed genuine. Some seemed like obvious lies or exaggerations. But now we knew for certain that at least some of it was real. Because we had experienced it ourselves. Luna appeared a few more times over the following months. Never when Marcus expected it. She would just show up randomly. Sometimes when he was watching television. Sometimes when he was making dinner. Sometimes when he was getting ready for bed. She would be there for a few minutes, and then fade away. She did not always bring the puppies with her. Sometimes she was alone. But when the puppies did appear, Marcus said it filled him with both joy and sadness in equal measure. He never got used to it. How could you get used to something like that? But he stopped being afraid. He stopped panicking when Luna appeared. He would just watch her quietly. He would talk to her even though she could not respond. He would tell her about his day. He would tell her he missed her. He would tell her he was sorry he could not save her. And she would sit there, that pencil-drawn ghost dog, and just be present with him for a little while. I saw Luna one more time after that first encounter. I was over at Marcus's house a few months later. We were sitting in his living room playing video games when she just appeared. Walked through the wall from the hallway into the living room. Marcus paused the game. We both watched as Luna came over and sat down next to the couch. She looked at both of us with those drawn eyes. She stayed for maybe 2 minutes and then faded away. Marcus smiled sadly and unpaused the game. We went back to playing like nothing unusual had happened. Because for us, for Marcus's house, Luna appearing had become almost normal. Marcus says he still sees her occasionally, even now. This whole thing happened about 3 years ago. Luna appears less frequently than she used to. Sometimes months go by without him seeing her. But then she will show up again out of nowhere. Always the same. That pencil-drawn form. That happy, excited energy. That pure love that does not end even after death. The puppies have not appeared in a long time. Marcus thinks maybe they moved on to wherever spirits go when they are finally ready to leave. He hopes they are at peace. He hopes they are playing in some eternal field somewhere, healthy and happy and whole. He keeps Luna's ashes in that wooden box on a shelf in his living room, right next to a framed photo of her from when she was alive. The only photo he has of her since he only had her for such a short time. People ask Marcus sometimes if he is going to get another dog. He says maybe someday, but not yet. He does not want Luna to think he has replaced her. Even though he knows logically that is silly. Even though he knows Luna is a ghost and probably does not think in those terms. Even though he knows getting another dog would not mean he loved Luna any less. But he is not ready. He still has Luna in a way. She still visits him. She still watches over him. That is enough for now. As for me, I am not the same person I was before that Tuesday evening in September. I used to be so certain about how the world worked. I used to believe only in things I could prove and measure and explain. But now I know better. I know there are things that exist beyond our ability to understand them. I know love can transcend death. I know consciousness continues in some form after the body dies. I know ghosts are real because I met one. I met a sweet ghost dog named Luna, who loved her owner so much that she came back to show him her babies. To give him peace. To let him know that death is not the end of everything. I think about Luna sometimes when I am having a bad day. When life feels overwhelming, or meaningless, or hard. I think about that pencil-drawn dog running circles around our legs with pure joy. I think about those 5 balls of light following their mother. I think about how love persists even when everything else fades away. It helps. It gives me comfort. It reminds me that there is more to this world than what we can see and touch and prove. There is mystery. There is magic. There is something beyond the physical that we do not fully understand, but that is real nonetheless. Marcus says that seeing Luna has changed how he thinks about death. He is not afraid of it anymore. Not in the way he used to be. He knows now that death is not an ending. It is a transition. A change in form, but not a complete cessation of existence. The people and animals we love do not simply vanish when they die. They go somewhere. They continue in some way. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, they come back to visit us. To let us know they are okay. To remind us that love never truly dies. I am grateful I was there that day. Grateful I walked through that door at exactly the right moment to witness something impossible and beautiful and terrifying and profound. Grateful I got to see proof that there is more to this universe than meets the eye. Grateful I got to meet a ghost dog who taught me that love is the strongest force in existence. Stronger than death. Stronger than the laws of physics. Strong enough to cross the boundary between worlds and manifest as a pencil drawing running joyfully through the air. Luna the ghost dog. The mother who came back with her babies. The proof that some bonds can never be broken. The reminder that love persists forever. I will never forget her. I will never forget the gift she gave us that day. The gift of knowing, truly knowing, that death is not the end. That consciousness continues. That love transcends everything. Thank you, Luna. Thank you for showing us that impossible things are possible. Thank you for loving Marcus so much that you found a way to come back to him. Thank you for bringing your puppies to meet him. Thank you for teaching us that the universe is stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. You were a good dog in life. And you are still a good dog in whatever form you exist in now. The very best dog. A ghost dog who proved that love never dies. And Marcus, my friend who lost his dog and then found her again in the most impossible way, he knows now what I know. That Luna is always with him. Whether he can see her or not. Whether she manifests as a pencil drawing in his living room, or exists somewhere beyond his perception. She is there, watching over him, loving him, waiting for the day when they will be together again. However long that takes, however many years or decades separate them now, she will be waiting. Because that is what love does. It waits, it persists, it transcends death itself. We never told many people about what we saw that day. Who would believe us? People would think we were crazy, or lying, or making it up for attention. But we know the truth. We know what we saw. Both of us. 2 rational, logical people who witnessed something that should not exist. Something that changed everything we thought we knew about reality. A ghost dog and her ghost puppies. A love that refused to die. A miracle that happened in a normal house on a normal Tuesday evening in September. The day the impossible became possible. The day we learned that ghosts are real, and love is eternal, and death is not the end of everything after all. Last story. The farmhouse. My cousin Jake had always been the practical type. He was the kind of guy who believed in what he could see, touch, and prove with his own 2 hands. When he landed a new job in a small town, about 3 hours from where we all grew up, he was excited, but also a bit nervous. It was a big step for him. The job paid well, and it was exactly what he had been working toward for years. But moving to a new place where he didn't know anyone was intimidating. Still, Jake was determined to make it work. He started looking for a place to live as soon as he got the job offer. The town was small, and there weren't many options. Most of the apartments were either too expensive or too run down. Jake spent weeks searching online and driving around the area on weekends, trying to find something that would work. He was starting to get worried that he wouldn't find anything before his start date when he stumbled upon a listing for a small farmhouse just outside of town. The listing was simple. It didn't have many pictures, just a couple of shots of the outside of the house and one of the kitchen. The rent was surprisingly cheap, especially considering how much space the place had. It was a 2-bedroom farmhouse with a big yard and a barn out back. The landlord was an older woman named Mrs. Henderson. When Jake called her to ask about the place, she sounded pleasant enough. She told him he could come by and take a look whenever he wanted. Jake drove out to see the farmhouse the following Saturday. The place was about 15 minutes from town, down a winding country road surrounded by fields and trees. It was quiet and peaceful, exactly the kind of place Jake had imagined living when he thought about moving to the country. The farmhouse itself was older but well maintained. It had white wooden siding and a big front porch with a swing. Mrs. Henderson was waiting for him when he pulled up. She was a small woman, probably in her 70s, with gray hair pulled back in a bun. She smiled warmly and shook Jake's hand before showing him around the property. The inside of the house was cozy. The floors were old hardwood, and the walls had been painted a soft cream color. The kitchen was spacious with plenty of counter space, and the bedrooms were a decent size. There was even a fireplace in the living room. Jake loved it immediately. Mrs. Henderson explained that she used to live in the house with her late husband, but after he passed away, she moved into town to be closer to her daughter. She had been renting the place out for a few years now. Jake asked her a few questions about utilities and maintenance, and she answered everything clearly. Everything seemed perfect. The price was right, the location was great, and the house was exactly what he needed. Jake told her he would take it, and they agreed that he would move in at the end of the month. The move went smoothly. Jake didn't have much furniture, so it only took him one trip with a rented truck to get everything moved in. He spent the first week unpacking and getting settled. The job was going well, and he was starting to feel at home in the new town. Everything seemed to be falling into place. But then strange things started happening. It was small stuff at first. Jake would leave for work in the morning, and when he came home in the evening, things would be in different places than where he left them. At first, he thought he was just forgetting where he put things. He had been busy with the new job and getting used to the new routine, so it made sense that he might be a bit scattered. But it kept happening. He would leave a book on the coffee table, and when he came home, it would be on the kitchen counter. He would put his keys in a dish by the front door, and later they would be on the dining room table. Jake started paying more attention. He began making mental notes of where he left things before he went to work. And sure enough, when he came home, those things had been moved. It was happening almost every day. He tried to convince himself that he was losing his mind, that maybe he was sleepwalking, or something. But he knew that wasn't it. He was wide awake when he left for work, and he knew exactly where he was putting things. Then one day, he came home and found all the kitchen cabinets open. Every single one of them. The drawers were pulled out too. Nothing was missing, and nothing was broken. Everything was just open. That was when Jake started to get really concerned. There was no way he had done that, and there was no reason for it to happen on its own. Jake's first thought was that someone was breaking into the house while he was gone. Maybe it was neighborhood kids playing a prank, or maybe someone had a key from before Mrs. Henderson changed the locks. Whatever it was, Jake knew he needed to figure it out. He decided to confront Mrs. Henderson about it. Maybe she had been coming into the house to check on things and forgot to mention it. It seemed like the most logical explanation. He called her that evening and asked if they could meet. She invited him to her house in town the next day. When Jake arrived, Mrs. Henderson seemed friendly as always. She offered him tea and asked how he was settling in. Jake decided to just come out and say it. He told her about the things being moved around and the cabinets being left open. He asked her if she had been coming into the house. Mrs. Henderson's face changed. The warm smile faded, and she looked down at her hands. She was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could tell she was thinking carefully about what to say. Finally, she looked up at him and shook her head. She told him no, she had not been coming into the house. Then she took a deep breath and said there was something she needed to tell him. Something she should have told him before he moved in. She said the house was haunted. Jake stared at her. He didn't know what to say. He had expected her to tell him that maybe a neighbor had a spare key, or that she had stopped by to fix something. He had not expected this. Mrs. Henderson continued. She explained that the property had a history. During the Civil War, there had been a small battle fought in the area. Several soldiers had died on the land, and some of them were buried there. Over the years, people who had lived in the house reported strange occurrences. Things being moved, doors opening and closing on their own, footsteps when no one was there. Jake didn't believe in ghosts. He had never believed in anything like that. He was a man of science and reason. There had to be a logical explanation for what was happening. Maybe the house had settling issues that made things shift around. Maybe there were drafts that opened the cabinets. He thanked Mrs. Henderson for her time and left, but he was more confused than ever. When he got back to the farmhouse, Jake decided he needed proof one way or another. He went online and ordered a set of security cameras. They weren't expensive, and they would let him see exactly what was happening in the house while he was gone. He set them up in the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway. Each camera was connected to an app on his phone, so he could check the footage anytime he wanted. A few days after he installed the cameras, Jake had to go out of town for work. It was a week-long training session that he couldn't get out of. He wasn't thrilled about leaving the house for that long, but he figured it would be a good test for the cameras. If something was going to happen, a whole week would definitely give him enough time to catch it on video. Jake left on a Monday morning. He locked up the house, double-checked that all the windows were secure, and drove to the airport. The training was intensive, and he was busy most of the time, but every night before bed, he would check the camera footage on his phone. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened. The house was empty and quiet. But on Thursday night, something changed. Jake was lying in his hotel bed, scrolling through the footage from that day. Most of it was just empty rooms with nothing happening. But then he noticed something in the kitchen camera feed. At around 2 in the afternoon, one of the cabinet doors slowly opened. There was no one in the room, no draft, no movement, nothing that could explain it. The door just swung open on its own. Jake sat up in bed, his heart pounding. He rewound the footage and watched it again. The same thing happened. The door opened by itself. He kept watching. A few minutes later, a coffee mug that had been sitting on the counter slid across the surface and fell onto the floor. Again, there was no one there. Nothing touched it. It just moved. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He checked the other camera feeds. In the living room, a book lifted off the coffee table, hovered in the air for a moment, and then dropped back down. Jake couldn't believe what he was seeing. He watched hours of footage that night. Over and over again, objects moved on their own. Doors opened and closed. At one point, he saw what looked like a shadow moving across the hallway. But when he replayed it, he couldn't quite make out what it was. By the time he finally fell asleep, it was almost dawn. His mind was racing. Everything he thought he knew about the world had just been turned upside down. The next day, Jake could barely focus on the training. All he could think about was the footage. He texted a few friends back home, trying to explain what he had seen, but none of them believed him. They thought he was joking, or that there was some technical glitch with the cameras. One friend suggested that maybe someone had hacked into his camera system and was messing with him. But Jake knew that wasn't it. He had seen it with his own eyes. When he finally got back home the following Monday, Jake was nervous about going into the house. He sat in his car in the driveway for a few minutes, trying to work up the courage to go inside. Finally, he took a deep breath and unlocked the front door. Everything looked normal. Nothing seemed out of place. But knowing what he had seen on the cameras, Jake felt different about the house now. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like he was sharing the space with something he couldn't see or understand. Jake spent the next few days trying to figure out what to do. He thought about breaking his lease and finding a new place, but he had already paid first and last month's rent, and he didn't have the money to move again so soon. Plus, a part of him was curious. Whatever was in the house hadn't hurt him or destroyed anything. It just moved things around. Maybe he could live with it. Then Jake remembered something. One of his friends, a guy named Marcus who he had known since college, had mentioned once that he knew someone who investigated paranormal activity. At the time, Jake had laughed it off. But now, it seemed like maybe that was exactly what he needed. He called Marcus and explained the situation. Marcus didn't laugh. Instead, he said he would reach out to his contact and see if they would be willing to come take a look at the house. A few days later, Jake got a call from a woman named Elena. She introduced herself as a paranormal investigator and said that Marcus had told her about what was happening. She asked Jake a series of questions about the house, the history of the property, and the kinds of things he had been experiencing. Jake told her everything, including what Mrs. Henderson had said about the Civil War soldiers. Elena listened carefully and then said she would like to come visit the house and do an investigation. Elena arrived the following Saturday afternoon. She was younger than Jake expected, probably in her early 30s, with dark hair and a calm professional demeanor. She brought a lot of equipment with her, including cameras, audio recorders, and something she called an EMF detector that measured electromagnetic fields. She explained that spirits sometimes caused fluctuations in electromagnetic energy, and the device could help detect their presence. Jake showed her around the house and explained where most of the activity had been happening. Elena set up her equipment in various rooms and said she wanted to spend a few hours in the house to see if she could make contact with whatever was there. Jake wasn't sure what to expect, but he agreed to stay and help however he could. They spent the afternoon and evening in the house. Elena asked questions out loud, directed at whatever spirit might be present. She asked for signs, for the entity to move something or make a sound. At first, nothing happened. Jake was starting to think maybe the whole thing had been a fluke. But then, just as the sun was setting, they both heard it. Footsteps. Clear, heavy footsteps coming from the hallway upstairs. Jake and Elena looked at each other. They were both downstairs in the kitchen, and there was no one else in the house. Elena grabbed her audio recorder and headed for the stairs. Jake followed, his heart racing. They searched every room upstairs, but there was no one there. Elena played back the audio recording, and sure enough, the footsteps were captured clear as day. After several hours of investigation, Elena sat down with Jake at the kitchen table. She told him that based on what she had experienced and the evidence she had gathered, she believed there was indeed a spirit in the house. She said it seemed to be the spirit of a man, possibly one of the soldiers Mrs. Henderson had mentioned. But Elena assured Jake that the spirit didn't seem malevolent. It wasn't trying to hurt him. It was just there, existing in the same space. Elena gave Jake some advice. She said that as long as he didn't provoke the spirit or try to force it to leave, it would likely continue to just move things around and make its presence known in small ways. She told him to set boundaries if he needed to. Some people found that talking to the spirit and asking it to respect their space actually helped. It sounded strange to Jake, but at that point he was willing to try anything. After Elena left, Jake thought long and hard about what he wanted to do. He could move out and deal with the financial hit, or he could stay and try to coexist with whatever was sharing the house with him. In the end, he decided to stay. The rent was cheap, the house was nice, and honestly, the spirit hadn't actually done anything harmful. It was unsettling, sure, but Jake figured he could get used to it. And for a while, things were okay. Jake learned to live with the strangeness. He would come home and find things moved, but he stopped letting it bother him. He even started talking to the spirit sometimes, just asking it to please not move his work stuff or mess with things he needed. It sounds crazy, but it actually seemed to help. The activity continued, but it was less disruptive. A few months after Elena's visit, Jake started dating a woman named Rachel. He had met her at a coffee shop in town, and they hit it off right away. Rachel was smart, funny, and beautiful. Jake really liked her. They went on several dates, and things were going well. Eventually, Jake invited her over to his place for dinner. Rachel seemed to like the farmhouse. She commented on how charming it was, and how lucky Jake was to find such a great place. They had a nice dinner, and afterward, they sat on the couch and watched a movie. Everything was going perfectly. Rachel started coming over more often. She would spend weekends at the house, and Jake enjoyed having her around. It made the place feel less lonely. But then Rachel started noticing things. One morning she came into the kitchen and asked Jake why he had moved her purse from the living room to the dining room table. Jake told her he hadn't touched it. Rachel laughed and said it must have been her then, even though she was pretty sure she had left it on the couch. Another time, she mentioned that the bathroom door kept opening on its own. Jake tried to play it off, saying the house was old and the doors didn't latch properly. But the incidents kept happening. Rachel would leave her phone in one room and find it in another. She would close a cabinet and hear it open again a few minutes later. Jake could tell she was starting to get suspicious. He knew he had to tell her the truth, but he was worried about how she would react. He really liked Rachel, and he didn't want to scare her away. One evening, after Rachel mentioned for the third time that week that things seemed to be moving around, Jake decided to just come out with it. They were sitting at the kitchen table, finishing dinner. Jake took a deep breath and told her that there was something about the house he needed to explain. He told her everything. About the things being moved when he first moved in, about what Mrs. Henderson had said, about the camera footage, and about Elena's investigation. He explained that the house was haunted, but that the spirit was harmless. Rachel stared at him for a moment. Then she started laughing. Not just a little chuckle, but full on, doubled over laughing. Jake was confused. He had expected her to be scared or at least concerned, but she was laughing like he had just told her the funniest joke she had ever heard. When Rachel finally caught her breath, she looked at Jake with tears in her eyes from laughing so hard. She told him he was crazy. She said there was no such thing as ghosts, and she couldn't believe he actually bought into all that nonsense. Jake tried to explain that he had seen it with his own eyes, that he had video evidence, but Rachel just kept laughing. She said the videos were probably faked, or there was some logical explanation he was missing. She mocked him, saying she didn't realize he was the type to believe in fairy tales and spooky stories. Jake felt hurt. He had been honest with her, and she was treating him like he was an idiot. He stood up from the table, frustrated, and walked into the kitchen to get some space. Rachel was still laughing in the dining room, making jokes about ghost hunters in haunted houses. And then Jake heard it. A loud, sharp slap. Rachel's laughter stopped immediately. There was a moment of silence, and then she screamed. Jake ran back into the dining room. Rachel was standing in the middle of the room, her hand on her face, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She looked at Jake and said something had just slapped her. She said she felt a hand, clear as day, strike her across the right cheek. Jake looked at her face. Her right cheek was bright red, like someone had actually hit her. There was even the faint outline of fingers visible on her skin. Rachel was shaking. She kept saying over and over that something had slapped her. Jake tried to calm her down, but she was panicking. She grabbed her purse and her phone and headed for the front door. Jake followed her, trying to explain, trying to get her to calm down, but Rachel wasn't listening. She was terrified. She ran out of the house and got into her car. Jake stood on the porch, watching as she sped down the driveway and disappeared down the road. He called after her, but she was already gone. Jake stood there for a long time, staring down the empty road. His heart was pounding. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The spirit had never done anything like that before. It had never hurt anyone. Jake went back inside, but he couldn't stay. The house felt different now. It felt dangerous. He grabbed his keys and his wallet and left. He drove to a hotel in town and checked in for the night. The next morning, Jake called Mrs. Henderson and told her he was breaking his lease. He didn't go into details, but he made it clear he couldn't stay in the house anymore. Mrs. Henderson seemed to understand. She didn't ask too many questions. Jake then called a moving company and paid them to go to the farmhouse and pack up all his belongings. He gave them detailed instructions on where everything was and told them to just bring it all to a storage unit he rented in town. He never set foot in that house again. A few weeks later, Jake ran into someone who knew Mrs. Henderson's family. They mentioned that Mrs. Henderson's grandson had been attacked in the farmhouse years ago. Apparently, he had been staying there for a few months, and one night, something in the house had physically assaulted him. He had been scratched and pushed down the stairs. After that incident, Mrs. Henderson had decided enough was enough. She had the house torn down completely. Eventually, she sold the land to a developer. Jake was glad he had gotten out when he did. He thought about Rachel sometimes. He tried calling her a few times after that night, but she never answered. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he hadn't known the spirit could be violent. But he never got the chance. She blocked his number and never spoke to him again. Looking back on it now, Jake says he learned a valuable lesson. Some things in this world can't be explained by science or logic. And some places, no matter how nice they seem on the surface, carry a darkness that's better left alone. He still doesn't talk about the farmhouse much. When he does, people usually react the same way Rachel did. They laugh. They say he's making it up. They tell him there's no such thing as ghosts. But Jake knows the truth. He lived it, and he has the scars, both physical and emotional, to prove it. He never found out which soldier the spirit was, or why. It was still there. He doesn't know if it was anger, or sadness, or something else that kept it tied to that land. All he knows is that it was real. And it was dangerous. And he's grateful every day that he got out alive. To this day, Jake is more careful about where he chooses to live. He asks questions, does research, and pays attention to his gut. If something feels off, he doesn't ignore it. He's learned that sometimes, the stories people tell aren't just stories. Sometimes, they're warnings. And sometimes, it's better to listen before it's too late. The farmhouse is gone now, torn down and turned into a parking lot for a new shopping center. But Jake wonders sometimes if the spirit is still there, wandering the land where it died all those years ago. He wonders if other people feel something when they walk across that parking lot, if they sense the history beneath their feet. He hopes not. He hopes that whatever was there has finally found peace. But deep down, Jake isn't sure. Because some things, once awakened, don't just go away. Some things linger, waiting in the shadows, holding on to the past with a grip that even death can't break. And that's a truth that Jake will carry with him for the rest of his life.